Bismillah walhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. What we want to do in the short time that we have is we wanted to talk about some important principles that we need to review as a community which is committed to the idea of Islamic movement. I think that that's something that's kind of, a lot of times in today's time period especially, some of us, we shy away from that concept. But the idea at the end of the day is that our iman is in movement, is in motion. It's not just the issue of focusing on perfecting our aqidah that has its place in the deen. And it's not just the issue of being, an activist that we're just out in the street and, we're trying to move the society towards a political transformation that's beneficial to the community overall. Like we see a lot of activists, they're involved championing the rights of people. They're involved in awareness. And it's not just the issue of self-perfection, right? I think that one of the things that we're running into, which is very crucial for us to look at, is that the context that we're living in, it really shapes the way that we understand things. Who gets a sense of where I'm going with that? Just so that there's some interaction. That this context that we're in, it shapes our understanding. Any ideas? Doesn't have to be perfect. Abdul Sattar, you always have a ta'aliqat.
I'm just listening right now. I don't know.
Well, who thinks that the purification of the heart is very important? Usually, what does that mean?
We're surrounded by non-spiritual or materialistic.
No, you're getting all philosophical on me, Wasif.
Sincerity.
But what does it mean, the issue of purification of the heart, really?
Sincerity in your intentions.
Aside from the sincerity, what are you focusing on? You're focusing on Allah, but what else? Yourself. It's not that complicated from that angle. Yourself. This is called an iPhone, right? It becomes a focus on the self. And so in this environment, the environment has the ability to transform our understanding of the deen, right? So that now our understanding of the deen becomes, I need to just focus on myself, right? The other side becomes like, okay, we live in technically a democratic society. Some would say it's a republic, but a democratic society. So from a young age, and this is part of the generation gap, from a young age, you're taught to have an opinion, right? Regardless of what that opinion means. And you're taught to not only have an opinion, you're taught that if you make the right moves, you can enforce that opinion and make it become a reality for other people. You can force that opinion to be an opinion that other people have to follow. That's kind of what we're seeing with the abortion debate. The abortion debate is going from one extreme to the other. So what begins to happen, for instance, some of us, we believe, well, actually all of us, we believe, but we may not always understand. We believe in the concept of shura, right? Right? But then when it comes to that environment where everybody has their own individual opinion, we may not believe in the concept of what's in the good of the group or the jama'ah. So then the shura becomes what? It becomes a lobbying contest of who's going to defeat who, right? We flip the Quranic concept where the idea is tahqiq masalih. The idea is لكن ليست المصالح الشخصية. It's not about is about realizing the good and the benefit and what's in the interest of the individual, right? But in the context of the group, in the context of the community, in the context of the society, right? So the point being here is that we live in an environment which, no matter what we think, because the Muslims have become accustomed to this idea of siloing ourselves. And this idea of siloing ourselves, it has a lot to do with thinking we're not impacted by the society, right? What takes place in the society, we're not impacted by it. And we have to really study ourselves. Let's not get offended. We have to study ourselves. We have two trajectories in the American community. We have that trajectory which was born here and has been involved in Dawah and the Islamic movement from that concept of being born here. And then you have that trajectory of the brothers that came from overseas. And so you have this idea as a remnant that's still with the people, we live in Dar al-Kufr. We're here to just, get our education, build for our community, and that's it. Some people are beyond that concept. They realize that there's more to it. But what that has done to the Muslim community is that it isolated us. After 9/11, the Muslim community got really shaken up. So we had to redefine really fast. We had to redefine who are we, where do we fit in, right? But we're still trying to figure out, okay, well, where do we fit in? Well, look at the society, is so bad. Let me just focus on my little world, protect my family, this and that, right? So what that does is it disassociates us. We're not so effective, right? We're not so effective where we need to be. And so we come up with solutions like, people may disagree with this issue, but we come up with solutions that thinking that we're going to protect the Muslim community by just addressing Islamophobia, right? The Islamophobia is going to solve, if we address Islamophobia, we solve everything. And that's not the reality of the situation. The reality of the situation is we live in a society which is about resources and rights. It's really about us grounding ourselves in the society. It's about people coming to know us and coming to know the deen, right? In the meantime, while we're building and while we're growing and while we're doing for our families and we're doing for each other. So that brings us to the issue of our purpose, right? One of the interesting things in the Quran, wallahi, I had a difficult time preparing for this because I was looking up the tafsir of the ayah, the ayah in the Quran in which Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala is talking to the Malaika, and He said, "Inni ja'ilun fil ardi khalifa," in that context. And the Malaika respond back, "Ataj'alu fiha man yufsidu fiha wa man yasfiku ad-dima'." Right? And so that dialogue that's taking place in the Quran is an actual dialogue. The ayah of the Quran is extremely, extremely, extremely profound. Because when we look at the ayah in the Quran, which comes in Surah Al-Baqarah, not only is Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala telling us about our origin, but it's impossible. This is what I found to be so heavy. I had to walk away from the tafsir. Sheikh Amin al-Shankiti, he brought the tafsir out. It was extremely profound. Because in the context of this ayah, the word Khalifa has multiple meanings. It has multiple meanings. And the Quran is like that. Dhu wujuh. It has different angles that you come at it by. One, you find some of the Mufassirin, they're talking that the ayah is talking about the creation of Adam. And usually that's what a lot of us focus on. Two, another point of tafsir is that this is talking about the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so you get the angle of what? You get the angle that is talking about the creation of the human being. And then you get the angle that there's this indication that's talking about this Imam that's guiding humanity. And then it doesn't stop there. When you go into the definition of Khalifa, there's this idea that Adam alayhi salatu wasalam, that really was being talked about is the generations that come after Adam. After the creation of Adam, you're going to have generations of human beings that come after. And then when you go to, you keep going and you keep looking, then the definition of Khalifa, it brings up this instant that the one who's the Khalifa is the one who's implementing the awamir of Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala, the commands of Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala. And so then the ulama, they keep having this discourse surrounding the ayah. And then eventually some of the tafsir, they get to the whole issue of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiyallahu anhu taking the leadership of the ummah in a time of crisis and all of that. And so it's impossible when you talk about the creation of the human being in the context of the Quran. See, this is where we fail as movement. Because a lot of times how we are trying to present ourselves to others, we try to do that with ourselves. For us, internally, Islam is not an ideology. For us, internally, Islam is iman, is revelation. But in relation to others, yes, we say Islam is an ideology. Because the others are not going to come at the reading of Islam from the angle of iman. They don't believe in the unseen. They don't believe in the creation of the human being, many of them. Right? They don't believe that even we have to argue whether the creation has a purpose or not. That's where we're at, even in the scientific realm. That in the scientific community among the physicists, there's that debate. Okay, we get to the point of the Big Bang, and then what? What's the meaning of life? They can't answer that for you. And they say that's not our role. We can debate that till we're blue in the face. And so the reason why I say that is because sometimes we block ourselves in our own fikr. We don't get to the real meaning. You have to realize that the ones who came before us that were about building the movement, they were in an environment of ilm. They were in an environment of knowledge. They were in a time period and still in which the remnants of the deen were to be seen. Right? So when you compare those who came before us, just a few, maybe about 100 years ago or so, what they considered immorality and what we consider immorality are two different things. Can you imagine Sayyid Qutb going to a dance at a church? He considers that a problem. He came here to the US, he went to a dance at a church, he considers that to be a problem. Where recently they were just debating about one of the states, they closed down a club because there was a transgender club in which they were doing fawahish, right? It was a transgender club in which complete difference. So when you talk about the meaning of Jahiliyyah, what they understood to be Jahiliyyah and what we understand to be Jahiliyyah are two different things. Two different things completely. They were dealing with a society that was more stable, a society that was more together. We're dealing with a level of breakdown in which when you actually read the seerah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and when you read about the point of Jahiliyyah, right? When you see what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was dealing with, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was dealing with issues in his society that they pertain to Aqidah problems, serious Aqidah issues. Serious Aqidah issues when it came to open shirk. But now we're dealing with the situation of Jahiliyyah, which is not necessarily always open shirk, is that people are committed in their minds. They committed in their minds to their belief, which is may go against the deen. Right? There was an external manifestation of ignorance in that time period that it could be corrected with the example of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But more so, if you study the seerah, you see the reality that the Jahiliyyah had heavy impact on the family. There was not one type of marriage, right? There was not even the relationship between children and their parents was destroyed because of the illicit sex in the community, right? And so the point being is that sometimes our concepts and movement we have to be careful that we're not just stuck in ideas. We have to go deeper. We have to go deeper in our reflection upon the Quran. We have to go deeper in our reflection upon the Seerah. Because no one right now is concerned, as the movement should be concerned, for the well-being of the ummah and the community. People have well-being in their mind pertaining to what? Only one aspect of deen. If you focus on tazkiyat an-nafs, everything will be corrected. If you focus on your aqidah, everything will be corrected. But they don't move beyond the basic arkan of the deen. That's why, for instance, like right now, we're still struggling with Islamic finance. That's the reality. We're still struggling with Islamic finance in this community, in the US. Because most of our focus is still on these basic aspects of the deen. It's not on the whole, it's still on these basic aspects of the deen. It's not on the whole of the deen. And the purpose of the reflection is that when we look at the ayah of the Quran, with regard to the issue of the khilafah of Allah on the earth, there's no way that you can separate it from any aspect of the deen. If you need a proof for the issue of shumuliyat ad-din, or to say that the deen is comprehensive, the ayah of the Quran suffices. You don't have to philosophize on it. What they did in the past, what a lot of the thinkers did in the past, is they tried to simplify deep teachings of the Quran, make it simple. But what we have done is we have abandoned the work, which what they were trying to do was bring us closer to the Quran and the Sunnah, facilitate it for us, remove the difficulty in understanding, so that we have that base, so that we continue to make our understanding more and more profound, while at the same time we're building for the deen. But what we have done is we have stayed with the what? I'll take the cliff notes. I won't do the work. And that's mostly with every mujaddid. You find the same problem that the people that come after, and this is why tajdeed a lot of times it falls short. Tajdeed, it needs the whole of the community. Right? So when you look at, for instance, Maulana Maududi's ideas about education, it involved the youth. How we were going to teach science to them, how we were going to teach deen to them. It involved the people that were at the universities. It involved a lot of different people in a process of trying to renew the whole of the community on every angle. It's an ambitious project. But if the people that come after, if they don't continue the process, then the work that came before in the other generations, it remains to the side, marginalized. It doesn't go anywhere. And then guess what happens? People look at the effort of tajdeed, well, really you don't understand deen. And we go back to the same. We're not going to solve, going back to the same was what? We're going back to the same solutions that people had in the past. If you ask the Muslims today what ibadah means, I guarantee you, most won't even give you the definition of Ibn Taymiyyah, which comes the most closest to what comprehensiveness means. That's everything which is pleasing to Allah, from those acts which have been legislated, that type of concept. You know, whether it is zikr or zakat or whatever it is, striving for the deen, whatever it is. If you ask the Muslims, you know, what is the meaning of Islam? What is the meaning of ibadah? It's like we have retreated like 50 years back. And so the ayah of the Quran itself, when we go into the tafsir, it proves that that we can't separate, whether we're talking about the creation of Adam, the concept of Khalifa will incorporate the creation of Adam. It will incorporate the fact that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was a leader that had an impact on every aspect of life. It'll incorporate the idea that in this ummah, you know, this ummah had a political leadership which was grounded in revelation, which pointed to Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. When we talk about the fact that Adam was taught the names of things, then we see from there, some of the tafsir indicate that Adam was taught the names of what? Of the things that are in the dunya. The things that are in the dunya. And so if Adam was taught the names of the things that are in the dunya, can we actually separate the deen from the dunya? Is it possible at that point? Is it possible? Abdul Sattar, is it possible in our understanding? We have to be confident in that. What was the first, or said to be the first among the majority of the scholars of the ayat of the Quran that were revealed? What was the first? In what context did that come in? Huh? In the cave of Hira. What was the context of the cave of Hira when the Prophet Muhammad went to the cave of Hira?
He said Allah was reflecting on the condition of his people, condition of the world.
We have to be bold about that, people. We have to be bold about that. Because if we're not bold about that, we will lose the meanings of Islam. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he went to the cave of Hira to engage in tazkiyat an-nafs, he went there because he was concerned with the condition of his people. Tazkiyat an-nafs is not a neoliberal affair. It's not a nirvana affair where I'm seeking my own perfection. Tazkiyat an-nafs is I'm trying to ensure that I am the best human being. I'm exemplifying the concept of Khalifa on the earth so that I can bring service to the deen of Allah Ta'ala. That's extremely important. Because our concept of Islam, how it's moving, is a concept of Islam that we can think, and I'll go out on the edge on this point. It's a concept of Islam where we think that it's okay to just say that Islam mandates obedience to the leader, even if the leader will destroy a whole country. That's how this is the thinking in the Muslim community today. That's why, for instance, on the issue of Yemen, you saw the position that we took as an ummah. And then the consequence of that, the damage of that, not only on the Muslim ummah, but on all of human society, is we have a humanitarian disaster which not one single relief organization has the ability to handle by itself. A humanitarian disaster which is beyond majority of our abilities to handle. Because we have accepted that type of idea. That we have accepted the idea that our deen has no relationship to life. So if our deen has no relationship to life, that means the ummah has nothing to say about it, because the deen has nothing to say about it. So other people will come and talk about it. And they will come up with whatever ideas that they want. And so that's the first thing that we want to understand, that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he goes into the cave of Hira with this anxiety, uneasiness about what's going on. Sheikh al-Salabi, he says, this is essential for every person involved in da'wah, period. You have to take a break. You have to break completely from what you're doing, from what you're engaged in. Sometimes those of us who we like to be on the move and engage, and we want to be on the ground, we don't take any time for our spiritual development. And what this has done is that it has forced the youth, especially of the movement, to say, well, the movement is just a material political movement with no concept of spiritual development at all. So what I need to do is I need to go join a tariqah. And then when they go to the tariqah, the concept is, well, just focus on yourself and your dhikr, and we'll see, your stages of growth. And that's where they stay. And then they abdicate themselves of any responsibility to anything else. And so, for instance, the first reading is that when the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ goes into the cave of Hira, with that concern for his people, he's waiting for Allah Ta'ala for some sort of answer. Allah sends the Huda, the Quran, the Furqan. And so then there's that, I'm going into the cave of Hira, I have this concern for my people. And so from the cave of Hira, from society to that cave of Tazkiyat an-Nafs, waiting for solutions from Allah Ta'ala, does the Prophet just stay there and that's it? What happens after the cave of Hira? What's the first of all, in the cave of Hira, what kind of ayat of the Quran are coming? What are those ayat talking about? Not about knowledge per se. more detail. About our origin, who the human being is, where the human being comes from. In the ayah in Surah Al-Baqarah is saying that the human being is the Khalifa of Allah on the earth. In Surah Al-Alaq is showing us the stages of our development. The context and the environment of the surah is that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he left society, he left his community to try to have some, clarity on what to do to change the condition. Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala sends them ayat which talk about the origin of the human being once again. From the beginning of the creation. And then the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is forced back into the community. He can't just stay there seeking perfection. So when he goes back out, now what happens after this, after the cave of Hira experience? We have two ayat of the Quran. I want you to reflect that have something to do with our understanding of ourselves. Because the human being is being redefined, people. This is just one stage right now. What you see with the sex changes, what you're seeing with the change of language. Now where, we don't know, do we call it him or she? Of course, we Muslims, we know, but the society is even raising children on calling children it. Changing the identity of the children. We have to be very clear on what our identity is. First of all, from the Quran itself, before we talk about our cultural identity and this and that, but who we are from the Quran itself, what is the identity that the Quran is giving us? So you have that ayat there that's inseparable. The deen becomes a deen that's talking not only about the creation of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala and the responsibility of the human being, but the deen is also talking about that the human being has a community. And that community needs some sort of governance. And then when we go to Surah Al-Alaq, we see that now the stages of the human being are being brought to the fore. Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala is giving us another type of knowledge about ourselves and telling us, look, that to come to this understanding, right? The first thing prior to come to this understanding of ourselves, we have to understand that, we have to have Iman. That's what it means to read in the name of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. But then what happens thereafter? What happens after the cave of Hira? What happens to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? He goes to his wife. And what does his wife do?
Reassures him.
Yeah, she reassures him. Five minutes or 10 minutes? So if there's no Khadija in the scene, what happens? Brothers, we're in a serious battle. We need to wake up really fast. We're in a serious battle with regard to the family being defined. That's one of the things when we talk about the Islamic way of life. It's not just the issue of Iman and having the right understanding of Islam and Ibad and this and that. The first, like Dr. Ismail Farouki said, rahmatullahi alayh, one of the units of the Ummah is the family structure, period. This is the foundation of the da'wah. He saw it that here in America, that was going to be the center of the da'wah to model what Islam is the family structure itself. So we're in a definition now battle over the role of women. And we've been put in a very defensive posture on this point. Khadija was extremely supportive. She was the backbone of the da'wah, brothers. If there was no role for the women in the da'wah in this regard, we wouldn't have Khadija and Aisha. That's just a reality. We would lose their understanding of that support, which is necessary. And some of the workers have talked about this. When you don't have a wife that's understanding of where you fit at in the movement itself, you're in deep trouble. Because within your household, you have no support. You're on your own in that struggle. And we've left out a lot of the women from this aspect. Or sometimes we don't understand or appreciate the role properly. But after Khadija, what happens? Our time is short. What happens? And this we want to leave with this point. Who else comes into the dawah? Now, after that intimate crew came into the dawah, or the intimate group of followers, it was not a few. It was a few, it was not a lot. What happens in the dawah? People were hand-selected to come into the deen. That's where we're missing. The point of tarbiyah, ta'aleem, to ensure quality development of our own people. This is what we're missing on right now. Because we don't have that qualitative development and we don't have those core groups that are going through that process properly, we're all over the place. That core group, the reason why it was there was because that core group was the core group that was going to handle the responsibilities of everything that came after, because it was not a cakewalk. What came after was trial and tribulation, politically, economically, right? Psychologically, emotionally. Imagine you're being ripped from your families. You have to put yourself in that human condition. That iman at that point in time, what it meant was that people were being ripped from their family. You know, we some of us, we don't like that we're displaced and we're put in somebody else's community and this and that. But these people were being ripped from their family, from their comfort zones, from their economic situations, much like the situation of the refugee, right? But they were able to overcome that reality. So we end on the note of saying that part of the fundamentals of revival of ourselves as a dawah effort is paying attention to these aspects, the aspect of the family, the aspect of our own development on a spiritual level. Don't get comfortable in that zone. You have to come back out, right? But at the same time, you have to know when you're coming back out and you're in the process of trying to build, right, that you have to take energy from somewhere. And then not only that, we have to train our families to understand what is the mission of the dawah, so that if everything else collapses, the families remain and they're able to rebuild. That's what carried the deen in places like Albania and Bosnia. It was families that preserved the Quran. When the communists came in, they ripped the Quran, they locked the masjids down. It was families which had preserved the Quran. And it's the families that are going to preserve us, right? And that means two things. And we close on that note. Our women folk and our children. We won't be able to pass the deen to the next generation if we lost on these two fronts. It doesn't matter how much you gain, brothers, in the stock market, what position you gain in the organization, what titles you have, what standing you have in your job. If we lost on these two fronts, we lost the battle. And these are the two battle fronts that we're being hit on, our youth and our women. And once we lose that, we lost our manhood. We won't recover. And I hope that, we take that point serious. That means losing our manhood. Once we lose our manhood, we won't recover. So recovering the manhood, it means that we have a relationship with Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. We have a solid relationship with our wives. We're training our children to get married. And we have that sense of mission. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر لي ولكم والحمد لله رب العالمين.